Hello, this is the Chapter 7 summary for About Behaviorism. Perceiving the world and gaining experience gives you a general purpose, cognitive activities, abstract and conceptual thinking, according to the mentalist theory. These have no external reference. In this chapter, we're going to discuss the behavioral processes which play a role in the higher mental processes. These processes are going to be under the field of thinking. In the beginning of the chapter, Skinner states that thinking is often referred to as behaving weakly. To think something is the opposite to know something. So when we think something, it is reporting less explanation than if you know something. Example, I think it is a dog versus I know it is a dog. Covert behavior. Covert behavior is completed behavior, which occurs on a scale very small and cannot be easily detected by others. Overt means out in the open. Covert means hidden, done secretly. Covert behavior allows us to have behavior and try it out again if the private consequences are not reinforcing. Covert behavior cannot be always easily detected, but it's not impossible and can be definitely observable. Skinner says methodological behaviorism neglects covert behavior because it's not objective. Skinner does present an argument that the mental life and the world in which it is lived are inventions. He also says thinking is behaving. Cognitive control of stimuli. Skinner says we pay attention or we don't pay attention based on the importance it has had for us in the past under similar circumstances. Skinner chooses the example of a traffic light. You may stop at a red light based on the fact that in the past you didn't stop at the red light, but yet you almost got in an accident. He also goes on to say forming concepts is also called cognitive. So by inventing concepts, it is hard to explain or understand behavior, but instead it may be easier to understand based on the contingencies. Skinner gives another example of teaching a child what the question 6 plus 3 equals 9. The children are taught the answer is 9. However, when presented with 3 plus 6, some are puzzled. Some might blurt out that it's 9. But does this mean that the child understands the commutative property of addition, or has he actually been taught 3 plus 6 equals 9? Search and recall. Searching is reinforced by looking for something in the past and being reinforced by that something turning up. Skinner gives the example of the animal actively hunting for food. The active hunt for food may be a genetic endowment, but the behavior in which he is looking for the food in a familiar environment, like the cat you put the food out on your front porch, is dependent on the success of finding that food from the past. The animal needs to look for the food and turns and looks for the food where it has been in the past. Skinner goes on to talk about people making copies of the world around them. They also recall and record what's going on in the world around them and store these in the mind for their future use and to recall this information. Interestingly, the person can evoke behavior that's appropriate to an earlier occasion and then permit them to respond more effectively. Skinner then goes on to talk about stimulus control and how we behave in special ways under certain kinds of stimulus, thus creating stimulus control. Future stimuli are effective only if they resemble the stimuli which they have been part of in earlier contingencies. Skinner gives the example of incidental stimulus, which can remind us of a person, place, or an event. Being reminded means we are likely to respond even possibly perceptually. For example, hearing a name of a person in a sense is a now, but doesn't make you have a copy of that person. It does mean that you are behaving in a way that you have behaved when you were in their presence on an earlier occasion. Solving problems. Solving problems is when a condition will be reinforcing, but they do not have a response that produces that reinforcement. They then try to solve the problem, which emits a response, which will then be reinforced. Skinner goes on to say that whether problem solving arises from raw contingencies or from instruction by others, it acquired it in an overt form and will be carried out by an overt level. Solving problems and choice. Choice arises when two or more responses appear to be possible to a person, and they have to choose or decide among them. The key to making a choice is staying away from indecisiveness and discover the effect response. When presented with choices and consequences are equal to the problem must be solved with a choice or solving it by escaping indecisiveness and/or possibly even the setting. When it is said that people can make choices and they like to make choices, this simply means that any decision-making behavior is strengthened by the one response and makes the other response unlikely, and the others would be reinforced. In this section, Skinner goes on to explain accidental traits that are learned by their contribution to survival, and it is similar to say that accidental behavior is learned by their reinforcing consequences. Creative behavior is widely concerned by the production of mutations or accidental happenings. In determination, this leaves no room for chance, though some have said that accidental behavior leads to the production of original behavior. Creative behavior is dependent upon the setting, which could vary, and the result may be reinforcing. Skinner gives the example of the painter who changes brushes or color to paint and give different textures. Structure of the mind. In this section, Skinner said the structure and the development of thinking have been metaphorically connected to that of horticulture. Seemingly, people look at the growth of the mind. So the growth is cultivated by a teacher, just like the crops are cultivated by a farmer. He continues with the development of language. Vocabulary, grammar, and the length of sentences are often used to determine the development of a child. However, it does not measure the instances of when a child hears language and then uses it for himself. However, when he uses language himself, this can be compared to the growth of the mind. Seeing behavior to indicate such growth is important, but crucial to know how the instances when the child uses the skills and develops new concepts. Features in the environment play a large role in the evolution of appropriate behavior, but contingencies of reinforcement are at work all the time to develop supplementary behavior. This is under the control of the same environmental features. Skinner says that we must always look to the constructing environment and not the constructing mind. The thinking mind. Last, Skinner explains that the mind is to be a place where thinking occurs in a stream of consciousness, where one memory leads to another. Skinner explains that the mind examines sensory data, makes inferences about the outside world, stores and receives information, makes decisions, and the will to act. Skinner then ends with reiterating that human thought is human behavior. My question: how does a younger sibling in a multi-age household develop language? Does this environment increase the developmental contingencies? And what are some examples how a family can cultivate a child's growth?